Hello, dear YouTube viewers, I hope you're doing well. Okay, so let's start our video. The cafe smelled faintly of cinnamon and rain. Outside, cars hissed along wet streets while people hurried under umbrellas. Inside, everything felt slower. Warm lights, quiet chatter, and the soft hum of jazz from a corner speaker. Ethan sat by the window, tracing his thumb along his coffee cup, watching drops race each other down the glass. When Lara walked in, the whole room seemed to tilt slightly toward her. She wasn't loud or demanding attention, but there was something about the way she carried herself, confident, polished, used to being noticed. They'd met 6 months ago at a networking event neither of them wanted to attend. Ethan had been standing awkwardly near the snack table when she made a joke about how everyone there looked like they were auditioning for a job they already hated. He laughed, surprised at how easily she spoke to him. That night turned into coffee the next day, and then dinners, and then late-night walks that lasted longer than they should have. She told him she liked his quietness, the way he listened instead of trying to impress. He liked how sure she was of herself, how she made him feel like maybe his calm steadiness had a place in her whirlwind world. They'd sit in cafes like this one for hours, sharing stories about childhood dreams and future plans. Ethan talked about starting his own design studio someday. Lara teased that she'd be his first difficult client. He believed her laughter was genuine. Every time she reached for his hand or leaned on his shoulder, he felt like he'd finally found someone who saw him, not as the quiet guy people overlooked, but as someone worth knowing. For the first time in years, he stopped feeling lonely. But little cracks started showing, the kind you don't notice until the light hits them just right. Lara always chose places where no one she knew would see them together. When he suggested going to a gallery opening her friend was hosting, she smiled and said, "You wouldn't like it, too many pretentious people." When he asked to meet her friends, she changed the topic. At first, he thought she was protecting their time together, keeping it private and special. But sometimes, when her phone buzzed and she silenced it quickly, a small unease stirred in his chest. In public, her tone changed subtly. Around others, she'd call him too nice, or laugh when he tried to share an opinion. Once, in front of a barista, she said with a playful smirk, "He's the kind of guy who apologizes when someone steps on his foot." Everyone laughed. Ethan did too, though his smile felt stiff. Later, when he brought it up, she rolled her eyes and said, "It's just a joke. Don't be sensitive." One evening, while they were talking about the upcoming holidays, he mentioned it would be nice to meet her parents. Lara looked up from her phone and said, "You'd probably wear sneakers to dinner. My mom would faint." She laughed and went back to texting. Ethan chuckled too, but something inside him dimmed. He thought about her family dinners, the ones she never invited him to, and wondered if he'd ever fit into that world of hers. His own life was quieter. His apartment was small but neat, walls decorated with his sketches and framed prints from local artists. His coworker Mia often checked in on him, the kind of friend who noticed when something was off even if he didn't say it. His older sister called once a week, always asking if he was finally seeing someone who treats him right. When he told her about Lara, she hummed thoughtfully and said, "Just make sure you're not shrinking yourself to fit her space." He laughed it off. Lara wasn't bad, just different. She'd come around, he told himself. She just needed time. Then came the night he saw the photo. Lara had posted it on her story. A party, dim lights, champagne flutes, her hand on someone's shoulder as she laughed. He wasn't in the picture. He hadn't even known there was a party. When he asked her about it later, she said casually, "Oh, that was just family stuff. You wouldn't have known anyone." He believed her or wanted to, but a few days later, he overheard a colleague mention seeing her there, with co-workers from her firm. That was the first time something real cracked inside him. Not anger, not jealousy, just the quiet ache of realizing you might not be part of the life you thought you were building. He wanted to ask her why she lied, but when she smiled at him that evening and asked about his day, the words disappeared. He told himself it wasn't worth the fight. Maybe next time would be different. Maybe she'd finally stop hiding him. So he stayed. Because sometimes, it's easier to believe in the person you want them to be than to face who they really are. And for Ethan, hope was still stronger than the truth. at least for now. For a moment, he simply stared at it, rereading the words as if they might change. She'd never invited him to anything social before. Every dinner, every date, every quiet evening had always been just the two of them, neatly contained, private, invisible to the rest of her world. But this felt like a door finally opening. Maybe it was time. Maybe she was ready to make him part of her real life. He grinned, typing back a quick "would miss it." Then he sat back in his chair, pulse quickening. He imagined what it would be like to finally meet her friends, to be introduced as her boyfriend, to belong. That night, he told me about it while they walked to the subway. She smiled but looked skeptical. "Ethan," she said carefully, "don't build castles on assumptions. Just go, be yourself, see what happens." He laughed softly. "This time it feels different," he said, and he meant it. Underscore 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 underscore. Friday came, gray and cold, but somehow perfect. Ethan spent the afternoon choosing what to wear, not too formal, not too casual. He ironed his shirt twice, polished his shoes, and bought a small bouquet of lilies, Lara's favorite. He'd imagined handing them to her with a shy smile, her expression softening, the kind of moment that might reset everything between them. When he arrived, the restaurant glowed from inside, warm lights spilling through tall glass windows, jazz humming in the background. It was the kind of place where everything was polished, the tables, the laughter, even the smiles. Lara waved from a large table in the corner, surrounded by people he didn't recognize, elegant, confident faces framed by designer clothes and champagne flutes. She looked stunning, of course. Her hair pinned neatly, her lips painted in a deep red that matched her nails. When he approached, she stood to greet him, brushing a quick kiss on his cheek. "You made it," she said, not noticing the flowers in his hand until a second later. "Oh, that's sweet. I'll just put them over here." She handed them to the waiter, without another glance. He smiled anyway. "This is Ethan," she said, turning toward the group. "He's the designer." A tall man with slicked hair asked, "Oh, interior or fashion?" Before Ethan could answer, Lara jumped in. "Digital stuff like ads." The man nodded vaguely, unimpressed, and went back to his drink. The conversation moved on. Ethan sat quietly, trying to keep up. They talked about overseas vacations, new investments, weekend retreats, things he had no part of. When someone joked about common people problems, Lara laughed a little too loudly. Her friends seemed larger than life, polished, worldly, perfectly sure of themselves. He felt out of place, but he tried to stay engaged, smiling, nodding, asking polite questions. He didn't want to embarrass her. At one point, he reached for her hand under the table, but she was busy scrolling through her phone, laughing at something one of her friends said. Then came the moment. One of the women leaned forward, teasing. "So, Lara, when are you bringing this guy home to meet the parents?" The table chuckled softly. Ethan smiled, heart fluttering a little. He thought it was a sweet suggestion, even imagined Lara grinning and saying, "Maybe soon." But instead, she laughed, loud, bright, cutting through the chatter. She shook her head, eyes glinting with amusement. "You really think I'd ever introduce you to my parents?" The words hit like a slap. The laughter at the table froze, trailing into an awkward silence. Forks paused midair. One man coughed into his napkin. The jazz from the speakers suddenly seemed too loud. Ethan blinked, not sure if he'd heard her right. His lips parted, but no words came out. He looked at her, expecting to see embarrassment, maybe an apology in her eyes, but she was still smiling, like it was all just another punchline. He forced a laugh, the kind that cracks before it leaves your throat. His chest felt hollow, his face burning. Someone tried to change the subject, muttering something about dessert. The chatter slowly resumed, thinner, more careful. Lara giggled again, waving it off. Relax, it's just a joke, she said lightly, patting his arm as if to comfort him. But inside, Ethan felt something cave in. He sat through the rest of dinner in silence, pushing food around his plate. Every time someone laughed, he flinched. Every word that came from Lara now sounded distant, foreign, like a voice he once knew, but couldn't recognize anymore. He realized then that he'd never truly been part of her life. Not really. He was someone she could show affection to in private, someone who adored her without expectation. But in her world, the one that mattered, he was invisible, an accessory she could put away when it didn't fit the outfit. When the night finally ended, the group exchanged hugs and air kisses. Lara seemed completely unbothered, chatting about weekend plans. Ethan followed her to her car, silent. The city lights reflected off her windshield, flickering across his face. She scrolled through her phone as she unlocked the door, sighing. "You were really quiet tonight," she said casually. He stared at her. "Lara, why would you say that?" "In front of everyone." She frowned, still not looking up. "Say what? You really think I'd ever introduce you to my parents?" She gave a small laugh.
Oh, that.
"You're not still upset about that, are you?"
Come on, Ethan.
It was a joke. Don't be so sensitive. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was no point. She leaned forward, kissed his cheek, quick, impersonal, and slipped into the driver's seat. "Text me when you get home, okay?" He nodded numbly. The car pulled away, red taillights vanishing into the night. Ethan stood there for a long time, staring at the empty street, the reflection of himself in the passing cars, small, blurred, fading. That single sentence kept echoing in his head, not as a shout but as a whisper. "You really think I'd ever introduce you to my parents?" For the first time, he understood it wasn't just about meeting her family. It was about belonging, about being seen, about realizing he never had been. Ethan spends the next 2 days in silence, waiting for a message that never comes. He keeps checking his phone, but there's nothing, no call, no text, not even a reaction to his stories. The emptiness feels heavier than anger. On the third evening, after pacing his apartment for an hour, he finally sends her a message. She replies with a casual tone, acting like nothing happened, asking if he's okay, and saying she's been busy. Her indifference cuts deeper than her words at the dinner. He types and deletes several responses before finally writing what he truly feels, that she hurt him. When her reply comes, it's dismissive, telling him it was just a joke and that he's making drama. That one sentence tells him everything he needs to know. She doesn't care. He realizes he's been holding on to a version of her that only existed in his mind. After 2 more days, they meet at the same cafe, where everything began. It's supposed to be neutral ground, but the air between them is thick with unspoken resentment. She arrives late, as always, smiling as if they're just catching up. Ethan doesn't return the smile. When she tries to make small talk, he stops her. His voice is calm, but there's a tremor underneath. He tells her she humiliated him, that she made him feel small in front of everyone. She rolls her eyes, brushing it off like he's overreacting again. It's the same pattern. She belittles his feelings so she doesn't have to face her own guilt. Ethan studies her face, realizing how little she ever really saw him. Everything she once praised him for, his kindness, his patience, she now treats like weaknesses. He asks her directly if she ever intended to introduce him to her parents. There's a long silence. She looks away, and that tells him more than any answer could. Then she finally admits it. He's a nice guy, but not her type long-term. The words sting, not because they're cruel, but because they're honest in a way she never was before. He asks if he was just someone she wasted 6 months on. She shrugs, saying he's easy to be around. That line breaks something in him. For the first time, Ethan doesn't argue or beg for clarity. He simply accepts it. He stands up, his voice steady now, and tells her he's done being easy for people who find him inconvenient. There's no scene, no shouting, no dramatic exit, just quiet finality. She watches him leave, maybe expecting him to look back. But he doesn't. He walks out into the cool air, feeling strangely calm. The city noises blur around him, but inside, everything is clear. For the first time in a long time, he's not chasing someone else's approval. He's choosing himself. Weeks slip by quietly, the kind of quiet that used to scare Ethan but now feels necessary. He stops checking his phone for her name. The silence that once hurt now feels like healing. He starts cleaning his life piece by piece, deleting her number, clearing old messages, removing the photos that once meant everything. Every little erasure feels like reclaiming space inside himself. He spends more time with his sketchpad, his computer, his work. The creative energy he lost somewhere in the middle of loving her starts to return. His art becomes his language again. One night, while staring at a blank screen, he begins a new project. No plan, no sketch, just emotion guiding his hand. The piece takes days to complete. A man made of pixels, dissolving into static, halfway between presence and disappearance. He titles it The Moment She Laughed. He uploads it quietly to a small online design forum, expecting nothing. But by morning, it's everywhere, reposted, shared, praised. People from all over comment about how it captures the instant love turns into realization, how it feels both tragic and freeing. For the first time in months, Ethan feels seen not by her but by the world and more importantly by himself. Mia drops by one afternoon with coffee, grinning. "You did it," she says, pointing at his screen. "You turned pain into something beautiful." Ethan smiles, not with pride but with quiet acceptance. "Maybe that's the only way to make it worth something," he replies. That night, as the glow of his computer fades into the dark, his phone buzzes. A message from a name he's tried to forget. "Saw your art.
Congrats.
You always had talent." He stares at it for a long moment. There's no bitterness in her words, but no warmth either, just a distant echo of something that used to mean more. He types, deletes, types again. In the end, he settles on two simple words. "Thank you." He sets the phone down, screen face down. No anger, no nostalgia, no need for more. Just peace, quiet, honest peace. He opens a new blank canvas and begins to draw again, the hum of his computer filling the soft stillness of his room. For the first time, he isn't creating from heartbreak, he's creating from freedom. A year later, the city feels different, or maybe Ethan does. The gallery hums with quiet conversations and the clinking of glasses. Warm light bounces off white walls lined with his latest collection. Conversations we never finished. Each piece captures a moment of emotional pause, a hand half raised, a word unsaid, a shadow between two figures. It's deeply personal, yet universal. People linger in front of them, whispering, reflecting. Ethan moves through the room calmly, dressed simply, confident without trying. He's not the same man who once waited for texts that never came. He has built something lasting from the pieces of what broke him. Then, through the crowd, he sees her. Lara. She looks familiar, yet changed, softer around the edges, quieter in her posture. There's something fragile in her eyes, as if time has finally caught up with her. She hesitates before walking over, offering a small, nervous smile. "You really made something of yourself," she says. Ethan smiles back, polite but distant. "Guess I had to." They stand there in a comfortable silence, surrounded by strangers and art that once grew from the ache between them. Lara's gaze drifts to one of the larger paintings, a subtle, haunting image of two silhouettes facing away from each other, fading into static light. Her voice is small when she asks, "Is that about me?" Ethan looks at the painting for a moment before answering. "It's about learning when silence says more than words." She nods, eyes downcast, understanding what he means, or maybe realizing what she lost. There's no anger between them now, no lingering tension, just quiet acknowledgement of a chapter closed. Lara murmurs a faint goodbye and turns to leave, disappearing back into the hum of the gallery. Ethan stays still for a moment, then picks up a glass of champagne from a nearby table. Around him, people admire his work, discussing meaning and technique, but he isn't listening. He's just breathing, steady, grounded, whole. He glances once more at the painting that began it all and smiles, not out of nostalgia, but gratitude. The pain that once defined him has turned into art, and the silence that followed has become peace. Thanks for watching. For more videos, please subscribe our channel. Awesome Visual Story.